I am so glad you are here. It is alive here at Magus Books, and I am happy to have my Instagram friends joining now too. So it's our weekly show. What's coming up at the shop tomorrow night? Tomorrow night, Adam, the illustrious astrologer, will be here after hours teaching a class on astrology. His depth of knowledge is absolutely amazing. He has been trained by wonderful people and he has practiced this art for decades. Highly recommend the class. This is a by donation class. And again, it starts when we close. So my advice, get here between 5:30 and 6 if you're at all interested. Should be a great class. There will be some spring celebrations going on perhaps on Saturday. I hope we get to see you folks there. And on Sunday, another by donation class. This one's at 4 p.m., so it's while we're still open. It's our palmistry class. It's taught by Chris Stock. He, again, just like Adam, really has specialized in his art form of palmistry. Absolutely loves this stuff. Guarantee you're going to get your palm read while you're there because he can't resist. So I really recommend that one. I have personal friends who've taken his classes not once but twice because they really got that much out of the classes. And I always think that's a good sign when that happens. Of course, tonight normally I'd be teaching herbalism too. I will not be. I will be lecturing to the Holistic Nurses Association here in Minnesota. It should be a blast. I wish you could join, but alas, no. I'll be talking about drug interactions with herbs. I will be talking about the bird flu and what the research suggests for us herbally, and I will be talking about menopause because that's what I've been asked to talk about. That said, if you are interested in the herbal program here, it starts every September. Year one will most likely be on Tuesday evenings this coming September. It meets for 1 to 2 hours each night right after we close. And if you need a payment plan for it, those begin in June. We'll split the payments out between June, July, and August if you want to split it up. Otherwise, it's all due by first class. Always a fun series, very hands-on. I love it. We taste herbs, we make remedies. It's just a blast. The Standing Stones are not meeting here this Saturday because of Paganicon, but they will be back next Saturday, and I will get into that topic, what they'll be covering in just a minute. Of course, the Reiki Share will be on the last Sunday of the month at noon. So if you've got your Reiki 1, 2, or 3 and you just want to do some tradesies, stop on by. It is always a really pleasant time. Of course it is. I love Reiki. That said, the astrologers group, or not the astrologers group, the seekers class that's coming up is meditation and the magical mind. Should be a really fascinating subject. And I just keep hearing great things about these guys in their current iteration. Next month, they'll be covering sacred sexuality and nudity. They'll be covering family and children and paganism. They'll be doing divination ethics and tarot, and then astrology and runes going forward. And there's a few more classes even after that. I should also say that next month in April, the Tarot Lab will be on the 13th. That's with author and tarot practitioner Nancy Antonucci. She's a brilliant reader, and the classes do not depend on your knowledge of tarot. They can be completely, you can be a complete novice. You can even not own a deck because she's got loaner decks for while you're there in the class. This is another by donation class, so come to that if you can, but come early, it's packed. And then the Gateway to the Gods will also be coming up again in the first Sunday of next month. We will be taking one herb, maybe Kalia Zakadachichi, because it's been a while since I've done it. We have sample sizes available for people to try, sort of like beginner level doses. We talk about the cautions and precautions. We talk about the folklore and the magical use and the history, where it's from, how it was valued and used there. We take a little break. We go on a little guided meditation so that you can take that beginner dose and push it as far as you can to see if you respond to this herb or if it's just overhyped for you personally. And it's kind of fun to watch different people have different responses to different entheogenic herbs. I have one product for you. And the reason I only have one thing to show you guys for products today is because I think we may be moving a few blocks from our current location. So I am not ordering as I normally would right now. But that did give me time to put, ooh, that's loud, to put a few grab bags together. So what happens to a witch who breaks the rules in school? It's on the back of the bag. You got to come in and find out. As always, filled with fun stuff and just a treat for everyone. They're $1.11 right now. The next batch will have to go to $13.13, but we've got more than a handful out on the floor, so there's plenty of time still to grab the 11.11s. That's really all I have for stuff, but I'm about to bring on the delightful author of Queering the Tarot, Cassandra Snow. I am thrilled. We were chatting right before we went to the live. She is fantastic to speak to. And I'm delighted she's here. You can have a sip, it's okay. So she has been writing books for a little while now. This one comes from Wiser Publications, and it seems like you've got a really good working relationship with them.
I do. I love working with Wiser. My editor there, Catherine Sky Peck, also does my covers. Just really brilliant, creative in her own right. Would absolutely love to see, and I don't even know if she wants this, but like a project that is like just hers one day. But yeah, I really love working with them. I feel like with Catherine watching my books, I've really grown, I feel like leaps and bounds with every single book. And so I'm really, really excited to see what happens with the one that's coming out.
You have a new one coming out? Oh my goodness.
Yes.
I have no idea. What is the new one about?
So the new one is called Tarot in Other Words, and it is actually an essay collection that I curated and edited. It has 9 incredible writers plus me on it, including a few local gems. And the book itself is essays on queer tarot topics, was sort of the way I pitched it to contributors. And it really runs the gamut. There's some really beautiful personal essays in there about when people were going through difficult times. The first essay, for example, is by Azali Earthwork, who has been really dealing with some intense grief. One of the people she was closest to in the world passed away a couple years ago. And so she wrote us a beautiful essay on grief and queerness, and ended up going sort of card by card in the majors to do like a grieving fool's journey, and walked us through that. It's really beautiful. 2 people of notice specifically, if a lot of people from the Twin Cities are watching or listening, Siri Vincent Pluff, who just wrote Queering the Runes and was also my co-author for Lessons from the Empress, which is about tarot and creativity and self-care. Siri wrote a really fun essay on reversals as subversion and used sort of a lot of like carnival themes and metaphors. So it was just really fun. And Siri and I are very, very good friends. And in fact, I have like 3 different chats from them I need to respond to on my phone after this. So they sent it. So we have a different working relationship that I might with other people because we work together a lot too, but are so close. And they sent me an essay and they were like, is this too much? And I was like, no, it's perfect. Because I also love circus, that one's super fun. And then I was so excited. I had someone really let me down. There was someone I thought was, if not a friend, then a very friendly acquaintance who wasn't local, who was super gung-ho about the project and then just became more and more unreliable. And we had to sort of fill a spot, and I had feelings about it, but it is what it is. But the person who stepped up was Janetta Petrus, who is Minneapolis and is the current poet laureate of Minneapolis, which is incredible. And she wrote truly one of the best things I've ever read in my life, which was an essay on the High Priestess as Black femme memory. And so she goes through all of these important Black femme figures to her in movies and literature and things like that, and talks about how she became very close to the High Priestess archetype through those portrayals. And it is just, I read it and I was like, I don't even know how to edit this. Like, to me, it feels perfect. And so the only things where there were some spots where she typical writer stuff. There were some spots because it was a rough draft and we were on a deadline that like thoughts weren't finished, or I was like, oh, did you mean this word? Like, so really little, but it's great. I love it. And then I sort of piggybacked on my own discography, but for books, my own publishing history. And I, when I wrote Queering the Tarot, I was still really in the throes of grappling with a lot of identity stuff, grappling with a lot of trauma that I was sort of trying to process and move on from. And it is a book I'm so proud of and love so much. And I'm so glad you all still love it and are reading it. I need that, frankly, under capitalism. And I am so glad that it's helping so many people. But I was very young. And then in Queering Your Craft, I learned sort of more about writing a book, zooming out of myself. But I also think I almost went every writer has their own criticisms of themselves. And I almost think I zoomed too far out of myself. I think more specific information would have made that book even stronger. And then I really feel like Siri and I learned so much from each other and lessons from the Empress. And so coming into this one, I'm 40 now. I have a 2-month-old. I mean, I didn't at the time, but it was in progress. I knew it was going to happen. I am in a stable, committed relationship with an emotionally mature person for probably the first time in my life. She's incredible and hot, but that's neither here nor there. If she's listening. And my queer platonic partner and I are still going strong, but if anything, it's so much more adult than it ever was, And so what I ended up writing about was essentially what it's like to be a queer approaching 40, but in a way that is like, oh, I'm stable now. I'm not constantly in crisis. I'm not constantly in flux. I am living in the day to day. And yes, the world is still doing what it's doing. It's terrifying out there right now. But my day-to-day life is like anyone else's in a lot of ways. Like, oh, I have to call the electric company. I have, and so I kind of wrote about how I use tarot cards for day-to-day things. But even so, like, as a creator, how do I bring my queer voice into today? How do I meet the moment while still meeting myself where I am? And so I'm really proud of that one. And essentially, like, how do you use the majors and how do you use the minors, but some of the majors as well, to build a queer life that you're really proud of and that feels stable even as chaos reigns. And I think that'll help people that have been following me since the beginning. And then the other essay that I wrote is how do we queer the questions themselves? Because so much our experience with the tarot is really, and we see this with clients all the time. I'm a working reader as well. That's how I pay my bills. Spoiler alert, if anyone thinks that you pay bills by writing books through a small but mighty publisher. And I won't lie, it helps. It helps a lot. I just got a royalty check and I was like, woohoo, credit card debt is done now. Like, it helps a ton, but it doesn't, float you in the day-to-day. So as a working tarot reader, I see all the time with clients the experience of like how impactful readings are when they say, hey, it's my birthday. I want to know what's coming up this year. Here are some of the specific things I'm worried about. Versus when people come in and say, I just want a general reading. And so I wrote an essay for queer people specifically of how to ask really good, impactful questions that address who you are and what your values are, however different they may be from the mainstream, and get that really solid, impactful answer from the cards that you're looking for. That was so much rambling. I'm so sorry. But
rambling was great. Rambling is great. I think you make a good point, though, about how to phrase the question. Because the underlying premises culturally that sit there on top can really ride roughshod over your individual need, no matter what it is. And I'm of that in-between ignored generation. Yes, I am. Oh, me.
Oh, poor Gen Xers. Yeah,
where people have asked, well, what is the thing you have? Why don't you use the pronoun thing? Why don't you do, because I had two choices when I was 15 to 20 years old. It was to laugh at the morons for not interpreting me correctly, or be permanently angry and gradually go insane. My tact, my choice was to laugh at the morons and go, I get that you don't read me right. It's cute that you're trying. And it also taught me a lot about how heavily personal perspective can weigh in on how you interpret what someone else says
Yeah.
and how that can sneak up on you. It doesn't have to be about, you can be completely fine with gender issues, sexuality issues, any of those things, but come at it from such a classist perspective unwittingly that you're
Yeah.
stumbling in exactly the same ways. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So I think
Well,
you
and
raise a good point about couching the question well.
yeah, absolutely. And I am non-binary and use they them pronouns primarily. And I do like the attack of just laughing about it. What I will also say is I do think some of that comes with age. And I think when you're young, everything feels sharper and pointier.
Yeah.
And as you get older, it's like, I don't know, it just sometimes feels, if I'm having a passing interaction with someone in the supermarket, it just doesn't feel worth it. And
No.
so, um, but I think too, there's been so much, and I do credit Gen X with a lot of sort of opening these doors of having real conversations. And I am an elder millennial. I look young, so people are sometimes surprised by that, but I am 40. And so, and on top of that, when we talk about class, it's so interesting that you bring it up because when generational conversations are being had, there are ways that I relate more to Gen X because I didn't have steady computer access until college. I didn't have my own cell phone until after college. And I was raised by a mom on SSI. I didn't have sort of the access that even some of my peers who were still like in the trailer park with me because things are just so different when you're at a certain level of poverty. And so I think too, and then also like, I love my mom, but she had her own stuff and problems. And I was in so many ways raised by the TV. And the people making TV at the time were older Gen Xers. And so I was raised by like Daria and people. And so I say all of that.
Sarcasm started to really creep in.
Yeah, sarcasm, and I think this is true of a lot of millennials, and maybe they don't realize that was sort of what was different, but sarcasm and like almost what I call like a liberating nihilism of like, oh, maybe none of this matters because the people in charge are ruining it all anyway.
Yep.
So maybe it's fine if you just do whatever you want. Like, who cares? And so. But like I said, I credit that generation with opening a lot of those conversations of like what is really happening and what is really going on. And I love, like, I know a lot about you because you're also close with Siri. And so, and so I think there are people like you who have really adapted with the times and maybe just wish there had been some exploration of stuff sooner. There are people who, I think this is true of every generation, get stuck where they sort of hit adulthood and have a hard time adjusting. So I get why people are critical, but anyway, all of that to say, I think it's so important that the conversations about sort of self and independence, and I'm a much bigger fan of interdependence, but I don't think we'd be having that conversation if that older conversation hadn't started.
Well, and I think generationally, I think we have to shake up perspective.
Yeah.
If we don't shake up perspective, then I do think the odds that you will completely misinterpret the person you're speaking with because you don't get their perspective at all, because you've just never been jarred out of your own. I think that really, this is one of the reasons they say travel, go somewhere else besides where you live.
Yeah.
Read literature from other countries, that kind of thing, because it affects your ability, your intelligence about how people live and exist.
Absolutely. Well, and I have a lot of friends who are quite a bit younger, and I have a lot of clients who are quite a bit younger, and I learn stuff from them all the time. Like just like I'm always learning from people older than me and older than both of us, like actual elders in the community and stuff. I'm also learning from that bright-eyed, fresh, like eager perspective of people joining and being like, oh, I just read this, and through today's lens I interpreted it this way, and I'm always like blown away by that. I am always like, that is so great. I don't think that's what I would have gotten if I read it, and now it like changed my whole perspective.
Exactly. It's why one of my favorite questions when I'm doing training is, well, what do you think? Let's start with where you are and then have a conversation.
Yeah,
At first, blow me out of the water or not. Either way, it's fine, but tell me where you're
yeah,
at. And then we can go forward because where you're at matters in that conversation.
absolutely.
Love that.
Yeah.
So tell me, because we haven't done any basic questions because you're good at this.
Thank you. If by that you mean I'm just a yapper who never shuts up, then yeah.
I love that. What inspired you to start your writing journey? I want to hear about your tarot journey, but what inspired you to really start digging in and really sitting at a computer and plunking out pages upon pages of things?
I love that question so much because a lot of times, yeah, we do start with tarot, and that story is a little bit darker, but we'll get there in a moment. I think a lot of what started my writing journey with tarot, I've always been like a hobby writer. I've always been a prolific reader. If you can see, nope, you can't. But yeah, this giant stack of books is my one of my three current TBRs. There's a digital one and there's one upstairs as well. And a lot of the digital one is like blurbs I'm doing for people and stuff, but still. um, I've always been and then these are the books I've already read, the ones under the lamp this month. So reading has just always been the crutch I turn to. And I think anyone that is reading that much is prone to writing as well, even if it's just journaling or scribbling out ideas or whatever. Um, and when I was a kid, if I was having, and even a teenager, a young adult, if I was just having a lot of feelings, I would just like write a short play about it, or I would start a novel that, thank goodness, I'll live in a drawer somewhere and no one will ever see. My queer platonic partner is on strict orders to burn them upon my death. Um,
Don't trust that. Don't trust that. My partner passed away 2 years ago. I absolutely will never destroy Dracula Drives a Chevy. It's not happening.
Oh no, you shouldn't. That's so good. But um, yeah. So I think as I got old, and then when I hit college, I have ADHD. I was undiagnosed until I was like 35, 36. So college was really difficult for me. I specifically have trouble staying attentive if people are talking for a long time, which is like what college is. It's just people lecturing. And I will be honest, for my first 4 years, I don't think I heard a single word that a professor said to me, no matter how hard I tried. And so I got everything I wanted from reading. But what floated me, and the reason I still got decent grades, especially as I got close to graduation, was I was good at writing papers, and I was good at condensing the ideas from the reading and what I think maybe was said in class into something readable. And I also really enjoyed it. Like when I graduated college, I heard the baby scream, but sometimes she does that in her sleep. I think she's okay. So, when I graduated college, one of my first things was like, oh, I'm not going to write papers anymore. And then I discovered like, oh, wait, I could just write nonfiction. Like basically the same thing. So blah, blah, blah. I ended up reading tarot professionally. And then through that, I was also an arts editor and reviewer at a local online paper that is now closed called The Column. And they said, hey, do you want to market your tarot business? Just writing, it was an LGBTQ plus outlet. And they said, do you want to just market your work by doing like 500 words an issue on, queer perspectives in tarot? And I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. I'll do that. And then I got into it. And then I also submitted when the also now defunct Little Red Tarot in England was looking for columnists. And there I didn't have a word limit and I could write whatever I wanted. And so that's when I really developed sort of the base of what Queering the Tarot would be. And then from there, I got my first publishing deal the way no one actually gets a publishing deal, and I didn't think it was really happening, which was Little Red Tarot was starting to take off, and a lot of people were really into what was going on there, and it was an incredible resource. I'm so sad that it shuttered, but Siri actually got their writing start there as well. And so but it was big enough that Catherine from Wiser, who we already talked about was reading my column, and she emailed me and she said, hey, would you ever want to turn this into a book? And a testimonial to witchcraft working, even though I had not started to put it in book form, I had started doing spells that I would get a publishing deal out of this somehow. By then I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And then of course it did turn out to be real. Though I think every writer who sort of looks into things like that wakes up like, is my whole life a dream though? Like, is this really what happened? For me, it was really a dream come true and really changed my life in all the best ways. Catherine just is that generous and that hands-on in terms of growing with what the tarot community and the occult community is doing. So yeah, that was great. And then I also think, to answer the question, when I started writing Queering the Tarot, and I hate saying this because I think anyone could have done it, it just happened to be me, but there really wasn't anyone writing specifically about queerness and tarot in this way. And I think every writer writing books is writing the book you wish you could have read. But yeah. I really, there really just wasn't anything like that happening on a larger scale. Now, of course, there were queer indie books, indie guidebooks being published alongside decks, things like that. There were very indie underground people just selling them off their own website and at events. But I didn't even discover a lot of those until like Queering the Tarot was out and I was going places and seeing them. So there just really wasn't anything being done. And so with Queering the Tarot, I wanted to really drop into the occult literary scene with something that was so necessary, but also very fresh. And I love that Catherine really reflected that in the deck used, in the cover art, and all of that. And I think the way it came together was just really beautiful.
I love the cover. Absolutely adore the cover. I think it's just.
It's from the Urban Tarot. It's really, I love it a lot. And it's their temperance card. And she approaches temperance as art. There's parts of the card you can't see, but that's fine. That just means you should pick up the Urban Tarot and see the whole card. Because she is also an incredible, awesome, artistic trans woman who put that together. So
very nice. There were, you're right. I remember there were a few bits and bobs out there, but nothing on this level of platform that would get the broad attention that this book has deservedly gotten.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I do think it's a good read myself. I think it's I think it's a really nice approach to the subject matter. And I know there are people who bristle, but at the same time, I'm like, you were just talking about being, at the end of the day, polite.
Yeah.
Accepting humans for where and who they are. I just don't.
Yeah.
I fail to comprehend sometimes, and I'm okay with that. I'm fond of saying that I'm very comfortable in my corner of crazy, and I'm sticking with it.
Right? Yes.
So yeah, I do. It's a book I have valued, and the work that you and Siri have done together has been wonderful as well. So I'm so happy and excited when that came out, I'm so happy for both of you.
Yeah, thank you. Siri will
So,
actually be at Tarot in Other Words, as will Janita. They will be at the Tarot in Other Words party at Moon Palace on May 8th. So just a couple days after the book comes out. It's out on May 6th.
excellent. I
Which, if
love
you
that.
pre-order it, it means you're probably going to get it before that.
Oh, good.
Because
Good.
online retailers just don't care about release dates anymore, it seems like.
So everybody pre-order. It's okay.
Yes.
We'll get you the book. It's not a big
Yeah.
deal. We'll get as many as we can get sold. Darn it.
Perfect.
That's the whole
Yeah.
point. Yeah. So I know you alluded to it and that it's a darker tale, but what
Give
brought
me
you?
1 second. I'm going to grab my kiddo.
Oh, yeah, please do. Please do. I love a guest star. So we were talking about this before we went to the live about how we have absolutely supported people bringing their babies to work with us if that's what worked in their lives. That there are complications to that you have to think about if you're the parent. There are complications for the business as well, but that it's a weird idea, but babies are people. So we prove that. You're back.
My partner happened to cross paths with me and was like, I'll get her. So,
okay. Well,
yeah.
Thank you, partner. Very sweet.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
you were going to regale us with a quick tale of you and your early tarot journey.
Yeah. So I actually grew up a very devout Christian, and there were a lot of reasons for that. The main one was just cultural. I was raised in South Carolina, where you didn't, where like your introduction to people was like, oh, what church do you go to? Like it was just assumed. And if you didn't go to the right one, there was like stuff there. And I didn't go to the right one, and that's fine. I actually still have nothing but love for my home church, but in spite of not identifying with really like anything they believe anymore. But they were very good to me when I really needed a group of people to be very good to me growing up. And so when I got to college, a few just really awful things happened to me in a row, things that I think are very typical of young assumed women set off on their own. And it was really hard and really scary. And the group of Christians that I had fallen in with at my first college were not the same as the ones I had been raised with. And they were really judgmental, really victim blamey, really, and even the ones that were sympathetic were like, well, if you just pray about it, you won't hurt anymore. And like, God will take your pain away. And I was feeling really lost because none of that was helping and none of that was working. And I was raised with enough self-esteem that like, I really didn't think it was me. I really did not think that I was the problem. I ended up, fast forward to a few months. I'm so sorry if you can hear her crying.
No, it's fine. Again, babies get to talk. That's one of our rules.
The partner is doing awful things to her, like forcing her to have her diaper changed and forcing her to put clothes on again.
With
Truly
cruelty.
messed up stuff. Yeah. And so, yeah. But, yeah. And so fast forward to, I was also kind of living a double life because I was a theater major, and the crossover of my friends in theater and the Christians I had fallen in with was minimal. And I felt more free and frankly was having more fun and felt more supported and accepted by the non-Christians of the theater. And a lot of them were, it just did not reflect that same very fundamentalist way. And we were just hanging out in the dorm basement one day. That sounds sketchier than it was. It was like a place we could hang out. Like it was mildewy and whatever, but it also like there were chairs and tables and whatever down there. So we were hanging out down there. And someone brought out a deck of tarot cards, and I was honestly afraid. I was like, I don't know what this is. And then someone put a deck in my hands and was like, hey, you're psychic, give these a try. And that was never a word I would have used to describe myself at the time. And so I was like, what do you mean? And they were like, you're always just saying things are going to happen and then they do. And I was like, doesn't everyone do that? And they were like, no. And so, of course, I couldn't really read with them, but I got really interested in them. And it definitely was not as scary as I thought it was going to be. And it was the old, if anyone remembers, the old sort of novelty Lord of the Rings tarot deck that looks very cartoony. And it also, what I was able to do and what I thought was so cool about tarot at the time, and is still so much of how I read, is that deck has like sentence long excerpts from the Lord of the Rings that sort of they feel fit with the card, which now I'm such a older experienced reader that when I look at that deck again, I like disagree with them about which Lord of the Rings excerpts I would have put on the card. But at the time I was like, oh, that's really cool. So I was able to like look at what I got from the picture and look at what they said and then look at the guidebook about what the card meant. And I very like my first experiences were developing that synthesis that I think really is what tarot reading is. And so I was very interested, like I said, and excited. And so my roommate at the time, who I did not get along with, but she had a tarot deck that did scare me a little. It was called the Witch's Tarot. But still, whenever she was not in the room, I would take it out and play with it and then put it back. Eventually, I got my own deck. I think I'm having trouble remembering which one was first anymore, but I know the one that really started me on the reading journey professionally was the Spiral Tarot. And
It's a good deck.
Yeah, it's the one where everything really just clicked and everything really was just like, oh, okay, I get it. And then from there was like such a demand for and at first I'm just reading for friends. And then, the demand got really high. And then I ended up getting like quit, fired, laid off from my last arts admin job that I had. And I was so sick and I was like, what if I just really try to make this happen? And I will say, have honest expectations and some way to make money that is not your fledgling business. I did closed caption transcriptions for TV and movies for literally years before I had a steady tarot business. And if I hadn't had that, like I literally wouldn't have been able to eat. And so, but it also gave me the freedom and time to really pursue this. So
That's amazing.
thank you.
Great. That's a great origin story. I love that.
Yeah.
I am so sorry you went through crappy experiences in college.
Well, that college was particularly kind of rife for them, but that's all right. I actually switched colleges to finish undergrad, and it was a much better, easier experience.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Well, and I'm glad you've come through it all.
Yeah.
Ultimately with such grace.
Thank you. Yeah.
Such a giving person in terms of just, you can see it in how you write.
Thank you.
That's part of who you are. I love that.
Yeah, I really don't ever want anyone to feel like I felt so many times. And I'm also, so I'm a double Pisces with a Cancer rising. I have several other prominent Pisces placements. I also have Venus and Mars in Aries, which is a lot of sort of like quick decisions, but then those decisions do become sort of the base. So like the way they tend to play for me is like, I hear someone is struggling and that Aries Venus is like, I can fix it. And to be fair, that's not always the best attitude to have. Like saviorism is also not good. But so it's sort of become like, I can help. And then with the Mars Aries, I'm so pinpointed on justice that I make those like, oh, hey, I'm very angry at the system that made this happen for you. And so I think that combination just sort of made me in the moment giver. And then that just sort of built on the foundation of hopefully who I am and consistently am. I just never want anyone to feel like I felt way too many times.
I completely understand that and empathize with that. But we are running out of time.
I
So I'm going to
know.
say thank you so much. And everybody should come in and pick up their copies of all of Cassandra's wonderful writings, including the new one coming out very soon. And in the meantime, I think our secret shopping word of the week is going to have to be your name. And I'm not saying it. No, I'm not saying it again. You got to watch the video to find out what it is if you don't already
Yes.
know. So thank you so much for stopping by. Have a wonderful day with your family. It's so exciting to have such a tiny little baby,
I
tiny
love
little
her
creature in
so
your
much.
home. So
Yeah.
have a wonderful experience with all of that. And hopefully we'll see you here at the shop at some point soon.
You absolutely will. Thank you so much.
Okay, blessed be everybody out there.